You're watching Channel 4 as the people of Waddington look to the future.
Hello, my name's Mark Olding. I'm an HGV driver. I work for Waddington Fell Quarries and I live in Waddington, a television village.
After a month of living with 29 channels, the village of Waddington in Lancashire has been weighing up the significance of television, and the village's own station has been finding its place in the community.
Right, welcome back to the studio, and tonight it's absolutely packed in here. Behind us we've got sort of a supporting cast, but with me now I've got 3 members of the first Waddington Brownies and 3 members of the first Bowland Cubs. Is that right?
Yeah.
And joined by the Arcala.
Yes.
Is Joyce Stott.
Yes, that's right.
And the brown cow. Brown cow. I was dreading that. I kept saying to myself, don't say brown cow. Sorry, it's brown owl. I even asked what it meant just before we started.
From the earliest days of the project, WVTV, the village channel, had attracted attention and controversy. The rows began behind closed doors, but the new vicar decided it was time to bring them out into the open.
This morning was a lovely spring morning, though the wind was a bit fierce. In the village, one of the ladies greeted me and said, "Vicar, I bet you're glad you're not in Liverpool now." And certainly it's very different from Liverpool, living in Waddington. And then I thought, I wonder what my former parish in Toxteth would have done with a village channel such as this. I can imagine that some of the subjects that they would want to cover would be unemployment, drugs, street muggings, the things they have to live with every day. Can you imagine them letting the Home Secretary get off so lightly on his visit on Saturday? They wouldn't ignore the poll tax.
When David Waddington, Home Secretary and local MP, came to the village to launch the Television Village project, the children who interviewed him submitted an approved list of questions. There were those in Waddington who'd wanted to raise controversies like the poll tax on the local station, but they were not the ones in control of the airwaves.
Do you like your new job as being a Home Secretary?
It's certainly stimulating, it's certainly challenging.
Waddington, unlike the vicar, was playing safe. The visit passed, unruffled by either politics or polemics.
Waddington Parish Council meets every month to discuss issues of concern to the village.
There are 9 members of the council, which is led by Eric Edmondson.
They control a budget of nearly £3,000.
While filming the seemingly innocuous workings of the parish council, the village channel stumbled on a local footpath dispute.
The Parish Council is currently involved in several...
The chairman, as politicians often do, expected to approve the item before it was broadcast.
...to move out of the area.
At one point, the council chose to deal with an item about a public inquiry into a footpath between Westview and Church Close.
In camera. That means off camera, in private, where we could not hear it. This was because of a suggestion that there should not be a public inquiry and the money should be spent instead on the village playing fields.
Can't be done.
But evidently, it is not as simple as that. Then there was footpath...
She's got the wrong interpretation of it, you see. I mean, it should never be. I mean, fair dues. I mean, she thought that that money was our precept. Right. And we're not spending that money, it's the county council. And this is, seeing that this is a subject matter, we just can't discuss it until the outcomes. It's just as simple as that. We get into trouble with this job, not 2 ways about it. We would. I just dare risk my life and live on that. No way. Sorry.
I don't think it was the meeting that they would have chosen us to film if they could have had a choice. Definitely not.
To ask the councillors
But when I sat there and heard them all argue, it was quite interesting. And then they decided that the cameras had to go. They were going to discuss this item with the cameras absent. They didn't want the cameras there. They were going to wait till we'd gone because people were expressing opinions and they didn't want them on the television set because they didn't want everybody in the village to hear about it, which quite annoyed me because as council, as parish councillors, you elect them, and I thought that we'd be entitled to see what they actually did.
In camera, that means off camera and in private.
We elect you to keep us informed, don't we?
Yeah, well, we are keeping you informed. We're keeping you informed.
But the cameras had to go out, didn't they?
Well, if you think that everything ought to be open, you answer me why the Parliament itself elected the Public Bodies Admissions to Meetings Act, which was specifically brought in so that issues like the one we've talked about, which are controversial and affect people individually, should not be subject to the public gaze. That's why they brought it in. So, I mean, the legal provision is there.
But I thought this was just a village channel and this was just locals learning about local issues.
I suppose it's always been the case that public service television in this country has been vulnerable to political pressure. And this country's system has been very complicated from that point of view because it's ultimately responsible to Parliament. It's a creature of the political system, and people with political complaints have sometimes been able to twist the broadcaster's arms. But on the other hand, there's also been a strong tradition of editorial independence and a view that editorial independence was very important and that one of the functions of the Independent Broadcasting Authority and of the BBC governors was to protect the BBC and the ITV companies against the exertion of too much political pressure.
It's interesting, really, on this act, because successive governments of either political complexion have very often thought that the BBC was biased against them. We had that with the Labour government, with Harold Wilson and Callaghan thinking that there'd be, and we have this now with Mr. Tippett and Mrs. Thatcher thinking that the BBC is against them. Maybe the BBC is anti the establishment of the time. I don't know. But they are always sensitive to this, aren't they?
I think the BBC is the alternative establishment, which is
I think so, man.
which is why Thatcher is so much against it, and perhaps it deserves it. I don't know.
Midway through the project, 2 MPs involved in framing the current broadcasting bill came to Waddington. The questions of ownership and control of television, still being fought through Parliament, were again raised by the villagers. The MPs were interviewed on the local channel, in front of a studio audience.
We've had a major argument in the committee over ownership and how much influence that various individuals have. And we've devised a situation where I think we can safely say that newspaper ownership and ownership of a number of television channels within Britain will not cross over. There are limits that are placed upon them so that no individual company or individuals can dominate the media. I have to say that is with the exception of people like Sky, who are based offshore, who of course are broadcasting on the Astra channel from Luxembourg, the Astra satellite from Luxembourg. There's nothing we can do about that.
Sky Television arrived in Britain via satellite before the broadcasting bill and well ahead of its competitors.
We take Sky and Mr. Murdoch, for instance. Now, Mr. Murdoch, I think, is it 4 channels of television that he, which is, I think, bounced in by satellite from
Luxembourg or somewhere.
Yes, and he also owns 5 national newspapers. Now, I think there are possibilities of grave danger there. For, I mean, politically, political influence. If he, Mr. Murdoch is very right-wing, I would suggest. I don't know, but there are problems there that if too much of the media gets into the control of one man, that there could be problems.
Yes, I mean, is it right that a businessman who knows nothing about the media...
He's in it for commercial reasons.
He's in it for, purely for... How can he be in it for anything other? And is that right? Is not our television too important a medium to be controlled by a businessman.
It's the slant that is put on things like the news. I mean, it's the presentation of a fact. There's two ways of putting a fact. It's the way it's presented.
You mentioned Rupert Murdoch before. If you have somebody who has a particular political persuasion and who perhaps wants to put a government in a much better light or much worse light, that's acceptable for newspapers. Ought it not be acceptable for television?
It's an argument, certainly, but I would like to feel somewhere along the line there's something that's objective.
Not when it's under the heading of BBC. One would hope that if a particular channel is owned by Rupert Murdoch, whose name's come up more than once, then you would expect that people realise that. But that doesn't come across. I mean, you know, some people read the Times or the Guardian or the Independent or whatever, and not particularly sort of believe that a particular view is being given by the owner of the newspaper. The same with the television.
Hello, Adam. Listen, any chance of putting out the roller caption, like, you know, ASAP?
The students who helped the villagers to make their television were keen that it should be good television. They were quick to pick up long-standing local issues, and, unencumbered by village loyalties, were often instrumental in bringing controversy to a head. Arguments about the heavy traffic from the local quarry had rumbled on for years, and it was not until nearly the end of the project that the village channel could bring itself to cover the row.
I mean, to a certain extent, I'd love to do a programme on the whole Waddington Fell Quarry issue, because surely in the village that's got to be one of the most controversial issues. It has to be. You've got the environmental side of it, whereby they're digging a great big hole in the top of the fell up there. Yes. You can see it from Clitheroe bypass now, almost.
Have we asked anyone to come down and talk in the studio?
Well, they've taken a heck of a chunk of land off there.
Wouldn't somebody come down and
we used to go up there, didn't we?
Yeah. Couldn't somebody come down and talk to us?
Obviously, our village TV channel, if we did something on it, has to be totally impartial. You've got to get both sides of the story.
It was a typical television dilemma. For some, an important story, money and jobs versus quality of life. Village elders, though, felt the issue was potentially destructive.
Over the last 10 years, there's been a 5-fold increase in the volume of traffic on the roads in Britain, and that increase has been very noticeable here in Waddington, especially lorries passing through from the quarry, as they are causing most concern.
They wake us up very early at 6:30 every morning, coming past, also at night, when they're going down, and all day long, they've really ruined the village.
Oh, well, they just sheer doors and that, you know.
Would you like to stop them?
Well, I suppose I would, but I don't think you can really, can you?
I think there's two kind of views have emerged as the project's gone on, both of them wanting a unified village, and one sort of set of thought says that to keep a unified village, you can't discuss controversial, sensitive issues. So keep it cosy, keep it sort of, you know, very, very, very restrained. Whereas the other sort of thought that has emerged is that, you know, this village is unified, it's a mature village, and people are close, and so they can tackle these controversial issues, and they can discuss things and perhaps reach some solutions by doing so.
You do usually, I mean, aside from representing.
The village channel was itself the subject of other people's television, and this outside interest in the community focused the minds of those villagers who were not prepared to just sit back and watch.
Last week, Granada held a press conference to give national publicity to what they're doing to our village. And Hacks dutifully caught the 8:20 from Euston to be with us. Our British Legion hosts laid on a splendid buffet, which allowed locals to meet the journalists in a social setting. But what did the newspaper people take away with them? And what impression of us did they gain? Their reactions range from the silly superficial to the pompous patronising. Eric Edmondson, chairman of our parish council, is quoted as saying, "Everyone was a bit apprehensive, but it has opened up avenues of communication to the people in the village that they did not know about." Spot on, Eric. When I viewed the village channel for the first time, I wondered where the bite would be. Now, for some reason, I can't fathom why, the channel's Director General, the parish council, and other nameless worthies have banned controversy. So you and I, all avid viewers, must live the fantasy world of woman's realm and assume Waddington's in a time warp, where the squire and the vicar are in their places, so are we all, and all's well with the world. Well, it isn't. When the parish council decides to silence controversy while claiming that we are all having a greater say, I think that's a bit naughty. Am I right, fellow viewers, in thinking that the parish council has never asked what the village thinks?
Of course they have.
The old thunderer, the Times, is
Yes.
right when it says the local TV station has opened a can of worms. Come on, steering committee. Let's have your debate about our TV channel out in the open, here in the studio, in front of your constituents. Let us see that you really do represent us all.
I actually think we could have a useful debate on the comments there said by Mr. Robards. Let's get it all out on channel, on film. Let's see what comes out.
They could do. I mean, if they want to debate, let them come and vent it. Let the steering committee hear about it. But I want them to understand one thing, that the parish council is non-political, and we've got to abide by the law of the country, no matter where, what, or how. And if we get into a slanging match, a political slanging match, I reckon that the whole purpose of the parish council goes to the four winds, and that's it.
As the project moved towards its end, the villagers were increasingly aware of the complex relationship between those who provide television and those who receive it. Television may seem comfortably British, but under the new broadcasting proposals, television can be promised by one group of people, but then taken over by another, without the viewers even knowing.
What you've said to me so far, nobody objects to foreigners, essentially. Let's be blunt. Taking over. I'm not being racist about this, but
taking over perhaps one channel.
Well, okay. Say you have an Italian that takes over Granada. What about a Frenchman who then takes over Central, and a Spaniard who takes over London Weekend
What about
Television?
an Englishman who takes over all the Italian channels? It can work both ways.
It can. It can.
The ownership from a foreign body is no different to being a white man or a black man. It's just prejudice. It's not too relevant to me. I would prefer that the BBC is owned by Britain or the ITV is British owned, but it's only that sort of natural preference.
I mean, the water authorities have just been sold off. There's a chance that they'll be bought by the French companies. It's a commercial world we live in. Television's just another commercial thing. How can you stop it becoming owned by whoever?
Not to poison the water.
In the last week of the Village Channel's life, the central issues of ownership and control came to the screen in a live debate.
What did the steering committee decide should be the format of our village television? Eric?
Well, we decided that it should be a community programme. We knew the lifespan of this particular adventure. We wanted to make the best of it. And we said, right, where are we going to start? If we're going to start with politics, the village are going to be fed up in 5 minutes. And the whole project, I would think, would have fallen apart. So what did we do? We decided, very diplomatically, that we should carry on a community basis and let the village be involved and keep the politicians out of it.
I wouldn't want to undo anything that Eric has said, but he will remember that I said I couldn't be gagged in my thought for the day. And things like the poll tax have been mentioned by the vicar. And anyway, the programme has evolved. The controls aren't there, really. It's the goodwill that was spelt out of that first meeting that has bubbled over into the village, and most people have rather approved of what they've seen on those screens. But certainly, we have talked about issues that have a political dimension, like the local hospital story, like the traffic from the quarry, like the poll tax, or who's going to be the next Archbishop of Canterbury. You know, is that not politics? Well, that has come in because we're all talking about them. We talk about that in the pubs.
To me, there's two issues here, really, because within this village there are people that think deeply about the young children living in cardboard boxes in the big cities, about the poll tax, about all the issues that everybody else thinks about. Now, I'm not saying yes or no about any argument, but to me, is a community channel just to show the little pantomimes and the little poetry and the little bit of this, or is it to get on to the more deeper issues that we all feel?
The issue of the cardboard boxes, you know, look, fortunately there aren't people in that position in Waddington, nor in Clitheroe. National TV channels can do that level of importance.
Evicted in Clitheroe last week.
Yeah, but that, again, that's not Waddington. If it was a story,
No,
see,
but
we've
it's
not gone out.
The Ribble Valley.
If it was a Ribble Valley channel, it's an issue, but we've not, you know, it's the same thing
But
as
we do
saying
care in
about
Waddington about issues like this.
Now,
That's what I mean.
it seems to me that what we have here, audience, because I started this off, is that we can appear to just concentrate on domestic activity and avoid the very real issues that are happening elsewhere in the community. Something based on Waddington is what we're interested in. Jonathan?
Yeah, because one of the problems is, for example, as four presenters, we all came forward initially to volunteer for the project. Now, if you put something on about the Waddington Fell Quarries, as presenters of the programme and interviewers, if you put that on and sort of try to make a personal issue out of it, we don't think the wagon should come through, etc., etc., etc. I sell things, for example. I could go up there and try and sell something, no chance. No, you said that on that village TV channel.
Community television, this is going to be the difficulty of it.
Not if you could do it on a permanent basis, because if you're doing it on a permanent basis, I think you would treat it as really, you should be able to work it out that you made a living out of it.
In the village afterwards, and this is going to be the problem.
Have you vetted every single programme idea that has come to you? Has that been your role?
No, I haven't vetted any.
So who has? Whose decision has it been?
I don't really think anyone's gone to the extreme of vetting. I think it's all been done by cooperation and compromise.
You find vetting an emotive word?
I do find vetting an emotive word because I don't think it's in our dictionary.
If this was a permanent channel, the village would have to perhaps even elect a steering committee and have day-to-day control. But for this experiment, we've been very fortunate in the kind of understanding that has built up from the word go between those behind the cameras and the machinery and those front of house. And that trust has actually given us what we've got. But in the future, if we were to have a village channel, gosh, all those pertinent questions of who controls, who selects, who vets, who makes decisions would have to be a mandate from the people.
It's interesting, Alan, because that would be unique, wouldn't it? Nothing in British broadcasting at the moment is answerable to the democratic will. Well, they are political appointees.
It's a good idea, though, isn't it?
Absolutely, we're all in favour of that.
The Waddington experience of local television could be repeated in other parts of Britain. The Broadcasting Bill's proposal for a fifth channel could be a means of bringing the attractions and concerns of community television to a wider audience.
I think maybe we'll sit back, maybe in 2-3 months, and maybe even sooner, and say, I wish to God that had never been, really. Because we're never ever going to be able to reproduce the village channel, and I'm essentially talking about the village channel. We're never going to be able to reproduce that, and that's a hell of a loss, because things might tend to fall apart a bit again. But I think the village channel would have kept it together. So maybe we'll curse you in the long run that you gave us something, and it's like giving a child a toy and taking it away. I think we might live to regret that a bit.
We've just been asked to clear up a misunderstanding. Barbara Harrison did not send in a bill for the meat used in the cookery programme and was paid no money. So just thought we'd like to mention that to Barbara.
Definitely, yeah. Don't forget to tune into WVTV, which is Waddington Children's TV, tomorrow morning at 11:15, where there'll be music, jokes, dogs, karate kicks and everything you didn't want to know about soaps.
And also, don't forget to give us a clue on Tuesday. We need you to take part in the audience if you could do, please. Anybody's welcome to come along. The rehearsal starts at 8 o'clock, and then we start recording after, so the more the merrier as far as we're concerned. Come along and have some fun. It'd be great. Before we go, we'd like to congratulate Cathy MacLeod, who retired as a secretary from Waddington and West Bradford School after 21 years working there.
Next week at 8, as the project comes to a close, Home Secretary David Waddington returns to the television village to hear the locals' views on the future of television.